Okay. Hello, everyone. I am CustomKits, and I am going to show you, or at least practice, sculpting the Frankenstein's monster based on the film. Now, let me just preface this by saying I am no means an expert of Blender of the sculpting field, but I do feel like I have enough basic skills to at least recreate the model as best as I can. So I'm just going to walk through how I'm doing this. I hope that you learn something from this, maybe. Stay for some good chat. Maybe we'll both learn something new based on what we chat back and forth. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy what's going to happen. And here we go. So, let me just start by saying this is Blender. So, Blender is a open source free version of the coveted ZBrush, which is another 3D modeling group. And it is essentially the same thing, except that it's a little less user-friendly as ZBrush, but in ZBrush's defense, 3D modeling softwares really aren't that intuitive unless you know what you're looking for. And so this down here on the bottom right, this is the software called PureRef. And so it's just simple little window that's just like, oh, it just has your pictures. You can copy pictures straight from your browser, so there's no need to save them. And I like to have multiple angles of my sculpting subject because it helps. If you're looking at a 3D model, it's so easy to get focused on just the front, and then you forget to work on the sides, the back, and then you have this really awesome looking front view, and then as you rotate it, it looks like a potato. So I don't want that to happen. Okay, so first things first, I always do this. So you can go up to this top right here. This is your mirroring. So you can mirror your brush. So I like to rotate my model so that I can get a general idea of where the eyes are going to be, and just make a little tiny mark, just so I know where I'm going to start, because it's hard to find your mirroring zone. I found that sometimes you start in one spot, and then when you turn on the X mirror, it's not the same as it was. So this just kind of helps me get my bearings. So I'll walk you through my brushes that I like to use. So you've got a variety of brushes here on the left side. So I like to use this brush here, the draw brush, excuse me. This is the clay strips. This just likes to add layers of clay, add some volume to your clay. That's what I tend to do. The inflate tool, I use this sometimes mainly for the nose, and it does what it sounds like. It inflates the area of clay that you're working on. The grab tool, it grabs part of your clay. The elastic deform, it deforms the shape but does not lose most of the geometry, unlike grab. And the snake hook, it pulls at a very tight spot, so you can get a really curvy, like a horn. You would do this when you're making your first version of your model, maybe. But I'm sure we can find a use for it. All right, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at the general shape of my model here. I always start with the elastic deform tool for this step. So you can see that his jaw is not that wide, even though in this front look, it looks like he's very square jaw. But this profile view, he actually has a kind of a thinner jaw. So I'm going to start by just getting the basic human shape, because he is made up of different people. So he's got the basic human shape. I'm going to just kind of squish the side a little bit. Now see how we're changing the form of the sphere, but we're not really making a huge dimple. It's if you're applying pressure on a large surface area as opposed to a small surface area. I'm just going to continue, and then I'm going to rotate it and see where we need to kind of adjust. So I'm going to just work on the back here. kind of look like a sort of a human shape. That's what we kind of want right now. Doesn't have to be perfect. This step, everything's kind of ugly. It doesn't really look the way it should yet, but things must look ugly before they look beautiful, I think. So basically, you want to get it to look like the human skull shape if you're going for a human. I'm just going to try to pull the chin down a little bit, maybe a little more outward. So now we kind of have this general human head shape. Now, one thing I've always seen people do is they forget that we have that large masseter muscle right here. So don't forget to add room for that. I'm just going to reduce the size of my brush a little bit so I can get that masseter muscle. That space in your skull where you have that giant fan-shaped muscle. Don't want to forget about that. Okay. So now that we have this basic shape, which we can always tweak as we go on, it's not really ideal to tweak your basic shape as you get further into the details, but I'm just practicing it at this point. But I think we're at an okay spot. So we've got kind of the back of the skull here as we come down to the jawbone. And this is always the most difficult part, at least for me, is just getting this basic shape. But we can do it. I'm going to go to the grab tool and just kind of see. So I'm going to turn off the mirroring here. And I'm just going to focus on getting more of that jaw shape here. Or maybe mirroring would be good. Because the base of the neck will come out of this spot here. So we want to leave that available for the neck once we do that, if we want to make it a bust, which I probably will. So we've kind of got this general skull shape here. So I just got a message from YouTube saying that you may experience some buffering because of the amount of video. So be warned. I hope that doesn't affect your viewing pleasure. So here's our general human shape, human skull. And so I'm just going to, at this point, just focus on larger scale. I'm not going to worry about adding like his lips right now or his chin or his nose. I just want the shape to look the way it should. Now, the biggest thing about Frankenstein's monster is the head, kind of this square-ish shape. So I'm going to elastic deform his head because we get that weird, really square forehead. So I'm just trying to look at these pictures here and try to match as best as I can. Just the general shape of what it's going to look like. Okay. So now I'm going to start working on adding some basic details, like marking where his eyes are going to be, his nose, things like that. Now, as I work through this, I see that the eyes are a little too high. The forehead is a little bit larger in these pictures than what it is here. So I'm just going to bring those down. So if you hold down the shift key with any brush, it turns to the smoothing brush. You can kind of erase over what you were doing. So if you ever looked at a human face, which I'm sure you have every day in the mirror, the nose and the eyes are very correlated. So where the nose bridge is kind of where the eye sockets start. So I'm going to look at the side view here. So the forehead's about, the brow that he has is about somewhere right here. So I'm just going to add that spot in. Add this little brow spot there. I mean to even expand that a little bit more because he has a very wide brow. And then he has the more narrow face. And like I said, I'm not expecting this to be perfect, but it would be good practice to look at something a little unique and focus on learning how to get the basic shapes and such. And as I add more, I might see where I messed up, so I can go back and adjust that. Okay. So I'm going to get the clay strips. And so the brow, the nose comes off of the brow. So we kind of have this general spot here. And we have the nose a little too long. So the nose stops at about the bottom of the ears. It's just kind of a little proportion thing that I've found out through my practice. And so then we can kind of block out, generally the ear starts from the brow and ends at the lips. So the ears will be somewhere right here, more or less. I know the lips will be down here because the lips form from where these crinkles on the nose are. So now I like to use the mask tool. So the mask is pretty cool. It kind of does a lot of things like you're doing in Photoshop, like if you're doing layers, trying to like change the color of a certain spot. So it creates a mask. So I'm doing right here, this kind of black area. Now this tells Blender, don't touch this area. Whatever you do will not affect this area. But we want to work on the nose, but we don't want to affect the rest of the face. So I'm going to press A, and then I'm going to press 4 to invert the mask. So now it says only focus on this area. And so now I'm going to grab the grab tool, expand the brush size a little bit, and then I'm going to grab the nose and pull it outward. So we have this general nose shape here. And I'm going to press A and 6 to clear the mask. So now the mask does not exist anymore. Now we'll work on the general shape of the nostrils. So I'm going to use, using the right and middle button on your mouse or your pen, we'll zoom and move the model around. So we'll get to making those nostrils. Oops, I mistakenly gave him very high cheekbones. Okay. So these nostrils, they come off the side of the face, off the side of the nose. Sorry, excuse me. So you start kind of at the base of the nose here, and I'm going to use the inflate tool, like I was saying when I first started, and really start inflating the nostril. So now we have this general nose shape here. And then I'll use the draw tool. And if you press control on any brush, it does the opposite of what you want it to do. So if I'm using the draw tool and I press control, it's going to cut or remove clay and not add clay. So looking at this far right image here, this kind of profile view, we can see that the nostril is a little flared out to the side and it has that deep crease. So I'm going to reduce my brush size and I'm going to use the brush tool. See how deep this is going? That means that we're running out of available geometry. So I'm going to do what we call remeshing. So in the top right, we can remesh. So I touched on it in my last video. What that does is that it increases the number of available lines on your model. Because how this works is it's a bunch of intersecting lines. Like think of like a lot of crosshatch. And so where those lines fall is where you can pull stuff. And if you have more of those intersections, you have finer detail. So this just adds more detail or adding more of those lines to crosshatch. I'm just letting it do its thing. So now we should see very crisp detail. So much smoother, less grainy. Okay, so we're going to work on the nostril here now. Decrease the brush size even more because this isn't like a huge crease in the nose. And then note that the nose, it does give rise to where the lips start and stop. So if I start here, make that little crease for the nostril, and it comes out here. And so we can always go over this and make it a little less defined because more often than not, these lines are not super deep. Or you can also change the strength up here, which I might try that for this. So the strength is how deeply it cuts in the clay. It's a little too soft. Just general area. I don't need to have it perfect yet. Okay. So I'm looking at this some more, and it looks like I need to increase the size of his head. So I'm just going to elastic deform his cranium, pull it up. I mean, like I said, we'll see more as we do more, how we can fix things. So now we have this kind of a taller head, looks a little more like our picture. And then we can also just kind of flatten the top. Okay. A little bit better than what it was. Okay, so YouTube is asking me to change the bit rate. So I'm going to look at this and see. Okay, I can't really do anything. It's more for Just says next time do this. Okay. So next time I'll try to fix that. But for now, it looks like you all can see okay, so I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, it is really amazing, like watching a sphere become something else just a few strokes of the pen. It's really cool to see that happen. I'm just going to make sure the nostril gets a little bit of love in here. So now we can go into the nose, start to smooth some of this out, try to combine the nose and the nostrils because we'll need to do that. And then to fill in this area, I'll just add some of the clay strips here and then just smooth those together. So we have more of a general nose shape and less like a balloon. And if we want to, we could expand the nostrils a little bit. But I don't think we need to because the nostrils will just need to be inflated, not grabbed. So to make this a little more um, anatomically correct, I'm just going to start cutting out some of the spot with the nostrils. But his nose is also a little bit longer as I'm looking at these prone shots. So I'm just going to grab the nose and bring it out a little bit more. I'm looking at this picture on the right, this prone picture. The nose just kind of comes at a slow angle. It's not like a hooked nose or anything. So let's have it flat. That seems to be a good shot right there. And then I'm going to start to define the nostrils. So we'll flip them over and we'll use control here and we'll start to cut into the nostril. And just looking at that, I did it a little bit too low. I'm just going to adjust the nostril here. It's important not to make them just circles because the nostrils are not just plain circles. And then we're going to make a mask for the nose, at least just the nostrils. And then I'm just going to pull them out a little bit. Because looking at these pictures, they're not necessarily round. These kind of got these little curved nostrils. So I just want them to look like they should be based on our reference shot. It's a little bit better. We've smoothed the nose. I'll add to this line a little bit more, really define that nostril. And these lines are a little harsh, so I'm just going to smooth them out a little bit. And so the lips begin at where these little lines stop. And as I'm looking, it looks like these lines come out a little more of an angle. So I'm just going to make that happen. So I had them a little too straight. I'm just going to smooth those out so it's not so harsh. Excuse me. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Okay. So now we've got these general wrinkled areas. And so the lips, how I work on lips is I use the inflate tool and I inflate where the lips should be, more or less. So he's got very thin lips. His lips are not very big. So I'm not going to try to give him huge lips. I'll bring the strength back up to 0.5 for this. Then I just kind of get the general shape of what the lips are, what the mouth is. So looking at the actor, his mouth is a little bit curved at the end. It makes like a little, not quite a smile, but there's a little curl to his lips. So I'm going to try to make that as accurate as possible. So we'll kind of go like that, and then we'll go across the lips. So now we've got a general shape of the lips. And looking at these pictures, his chin comes out from underneath his bottom lip. So his chin protrudes forward. So I'm going to use the grab tool after I make a mask on the chin. So I'll put about here. Oops, pressed the wrong button. And then we'll just kind of grab that chin and bring it forward a little bit. Oh, you got double chin. Literally a double chin. Okay, so we'll just kind of bring out the chin. It's like we'll have to decrease his jaw size, which is totally fine. These things happen as you focus more on what you're working on. You see, oh, I could fix this. I could make it a little better. I'm going to actually make the mask a little bit bigger because it goes from his whole chin. I'm going to call that his chin. And then we will grab his chin from the front and protrude it out like it is in the other picture right there. We can also protrude out like that if we need to. So now we'll clear the mask, and then we're going to elastic deform his jaw. His jaw is a little too wide. Also need to drop this area because this is not his chin. We're making this his chin now. So I tend to work my models bottom up. So I'll focus more on like the chin, the nose, and I'll work my way up to the eyes. It just really helps me work like that. I don't know why. That's just how I've always done it. Some people will do the eyes first, but the nose should always be the first part that you make because the nose defines the proportions of the face. So now we can start looking at some of these other features of our monster here. So I can always go back and inflate these lips just a little bit, which I think I will because his top lip is a little larger, or this kind of space between his nose and his lip. I'm not sure if you can see that on your screen. This middle picture here, how his upper lip, that area between his nose and his lip, is a little puffy or a little larger, not as flat. So I'm just going to inflate that just a little bit. Just like so. I'll make a mask for it. And then we'll inflate it. Let's see if that did anything. Whoa, maybe a little too inflated. Just use some clay strips, maybe. So add a little more volume to that. It's not a mustache. It's his upper lip. I can already hear the comments saying, "Why are you giving him a mustache?" I'm just adding some volume to his upper lip here because he looks like this creature has a more inflated upper lip. This is my first time doing this character, so I am just learning as I'm going. I've never attempted to sculpt this before, so this is why sometimes I'm kind of jumping like, "Oh no, I need to do this. I need to do this." If I were to work on a character more than once, I would probably start to figure out little tips and tricks. So this is raw first time seeing this. Just going to redefine that lip now that we've got some of that upper lip volume, which needs a little bit more actually. Surprised. Mainly in the middle. Okay. Looking at this, he kind of reminds me of the heads at Stonehenge. Just the brow and the nose. Okay. So now we can kind of focus on defining the lip a little bit more. So to do that, I usually use the grab tool. And so looking at the profile picture, this is why you always need to have multiple pictures, different angles. I am going to just push in on that lip, just all the way across to define that chin some more too, and then smooth it out. To pull this out a little bit because looking at here, the sides of his lips are a little bit larger than the. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry, guys. Okay, pull that out and then smooth it. More to really define. Oh, I thought I plugged in my computer. Windows says, maybe you should plug in it. Maybe you should plug it in. Yeah, maybe I should. I like how it's saying, maybe you should plug it in so your computer doesn't uh, drain the battery, as opposed to your computer is going to die soon. You better plug it in. Like they're trying to be too nice. Okay, so we'll define that lip a little bit more. I may even use the remove clay tool. And then add a little bit of clay. I'm just trying to define this area in this black and white prone photo, just trying to make that chin look okay. The chin and the lip. Okay. I might come back to that. It doesn't look exactly how I'd like it to. Clay strips, maybe. Might be a little bit better. I found that clay strips does a lot better at adding layers of clay than the draw tool. So I tend to use clay strips when I'm trying to add volume to a model. Okay, so I'm going to define, let's see, I think I'll start on the face next. The eyes, I should say, because we're working on the face right now. So to do the eyes, I use the draw tool and I go to the opposite. So I use control. So the bridge of the nose is where the eye socket starts and it ends at the brow. So in general, I have the brow right here. So the eye socket should be about here. That's terrifying. Okay. Let's try to. The eye sockets are not as tiny as people think they are. They're actually pretty big. They're very deep sockets where our eyes sit. So as we're adjusting the eye, we'll start to see that the brow is forming around it because the brow is formed around the muscles and the bones around the eye socket. Just checking a couple things. So I am going to pull out the brow, just so we can kind of get a feel for how deep the eyes should be. Now the eyes in Frankenstein's monster have always been a little sunken in. It's probably just a character choice. I'm just going to add some clay. And that brow is pretty far out, so I'm going to add a little bit more clay. Okay, that's a good start. And then we will smooth that into the skull. Yeah, it looks kind of weird right now, but we'll smooth it out. And now the brow is kind of it's not a very realistic brow, I guess, in terms of how the nose, like the nose is not part of that brow. It kind of just stops. It looks like someone put a plaster brow on top of him. So there's really no blending onto here, but we'll blend it together. Just don't tell anybody. It's our little secret. So now we've got, in general, I think we're at a good basic shape. Like we can kind of see what creature or what character this could be. So I think we're doing well so far. So now I'm going to cut into the eye socket some more. Oops. Oh, wrong. I was using the wrong brush. A little bit deeper. And the eye sockets are not round. A lot of people make the mistake that the eye sockets are circles. They're actually this kind of a weird oblong shape. Something like that, because it's not a circle. So I'm going to save this right here, just in case. I'm just going to call it Frankenstein. I'm just going to add a little bit more depth to these eye sockets, and you'll see why in a moment. So now so this is something different I have not done on a video yet. So I'm going to change mode from sculpting mode to object mode. And so object mode, it allows you to add different, what they call meshes to your scene here. So I'm going to add up here a mesh sphere because that So I'm going to use the eye for. Then you can move things around. So I'm going to rotate this. So we have this part being the pupil. This might be kind of freaky. And then we will kind of look to see where this is at. So it's in parallel with Frankenstein's monster. We don't want it to be parallel. We want to go inside the eye socket. So I'm going to press S for scale. I'm going to scale it down. And now the eye socket takes up, or the eye takes up a large part of the eye socket. So the eye should not be that much smaller than the eye socket. Now that's just how one way of doing the eyes. Some people actually sculpt the eyelids first, and then they put the eyes in there. I like to have the eye in there like an actual object, because if something happens, I can just remove that eye, and then it's okay. So the eye, I think that's a good depth because it's still within the bridge area. If you look at this area here, if you ever looked at someone at a profile view, you'd see that their eye kind of stops at about the inner part of the bridge here. I think that's a good spot for the eye to sit. So I'm going to press Shift and D for duplicate. So I make two, and I'll put the eye right there. And for similar depth, are these the same depth? Now I'm going to clear out this these lines on the sphere anyway, so I'm not too worried that they're looking to the right. Okay. Just looking at these. I want to move this guy a little bit here. But that should be about the same depth. But I think I'm going to move them more to the center because they do sit in the center of the eye socket. Might be a little... Okay. So now we have this general area where the eyes are. So then I'm going to make these into one object. Control J for join. And I'm going to do a sculpt. So I'm only focused on these spheres. And so I'm going to remesh those. So now that they have better geometry. And then I'm just going to smooth those out. Maybe that wasn't the best idea. Okay, I'm going to keep these the way they are. Let's go to sculpt mode. Let's grab one of these spheres. Let's see how. If I remesh this one. Okay. Just part of the process. Sorry if it's kind of tedious. So maybe I'll leave them for now. Go back to Frankenstein's monster. And then we'll start to add. Let's see. Why is it not letting me? Ah, that's why. No. Uh-huh. That's why. These little detailed things in Blender sometimes become a thorn in my side. Okay. So now we've got the eyes in there. We'll use clay strips. And then since we're focusing on the quad sphere, which is Frankenstein's monster, we will only add clay to that, but it will surround the eyeball eventually, like that. So I'm just going to add some depth into these eyes because we have muscles in there. These will eventually become the eyelids. Some people also just like to add the lid. I've seen people just kind of add enough until you have a lid shape. That's one way to do it too. Something like this. And then you can smooth it out to become part of everything else. But that's not how I'm going to do it. I'm going to add a little bit of depth to the eye. So there is a lot of muscle in the eye. His eyelids are a little bit lower. That's just how some of these define him. He's got kind of these like lower lids that are kind of half closed. So we could probably make that happen too. It's important to note he's not like angry, at least not in these pictures. So I'm not going to try to make him look angry. I do want to give him kind of a signature look. So as we do more, we'll start to see the shape of the eye in the surrounding areas form a little bit more. Now the eyes are the most important part because if those do not look right, our brains don't recognize them as what they are, and then we start to think it looks wrong and creepy. So I'm just going to keep on adding some layer here. And just because his eyelids are a little bit lower, I'm going to try to compensate for that by adding more layers of clay. So another way we could do this is cover the entire eye, which I might try here. It's kind of creepy, I know. But you get some of the eyelid shape by doing that. And try to, how far can we go back? Oh, perfect. Okay. So I may try this method where you just kind of trace out the eye with clay. Try using draw or just clay and not clay strips. That may be the reason why it's not working. Maybe clay strips is the best way to go. Try the draw. Does that work? Yeah, the draw wouldn't work as well. So clay strips is gonna have to be the way to go. kind of add. So this will be the top lid generally, general spot. Yes, this is very alien looking. I suppose that is kind of how our brains see because, uncanny valley sort of. So what I did here is I just went horizontally across the eye. I think we're getting a good look with that. But I still need to define the eyelid and things like that. We'll do that after. I just want the general look for now. And we'll add the bottom eyelid. So something like this. And then we will go in smaller with the draw tool, the opposite draw. And we'll start to define the eyelid. But there's our problem again of not enough geometry, so I'm going to remesh this again. Isn't it crazy how just adding a little bit of pieces that make things human looking, our brain's like, yeah, that's a human or was a human or something like that. It's crazy how our brains work so fast with that. Doing my hydration check. A little bit of water. So we'll define the eyelid. I think it's just a little bit too large. That's the problem. So we'll define the eyelid. From the rest of the skin around the eye. And we'll do that for both the bottom and the top. Just defining it. He looks like he hasn't had his coffee yet, and someone's trying to talk to him, and he's like, "Oh, don't talk to me. I haven't had my coffee." He looks so done with everything. Oh, that's funny. So we'll just define that bottom eyelid. I'm just trying to be anatomically correct here, trying to have the eyelids meet somewhere like that. And we can smooth out the bottom here to make the line less harsh while still keeping the eyelid. Whereas for the top eyelid, we'll have to be a little more clever because the eyelid kind of hangs forward. So I'm just inflating it right there. That seems to be doing what I want it to, which is good. And I'll try to inflate the bottom lid. I probably don't need to. So I'm making it look kind of puffy on the eye, maybe. Okay. Thank you, journalist. I think it is coming out pretty well from a first attempt. It's in no means going to be perfect, but it'll at least be enough that we know what this character is, and then I'll know what to do and what not to do next time if I do this again. And so the brow, kind of strangely, it kind of gets sucked in, like it kind of deflates here. So to do that, I'm just going to use the draw tool and do like the negative draw, and then just maybe a little too big push. So the brow kind of has this deflated region. And then we'll just smooth that out. And by the deflated region, I mean in this middle picture, you can see how the eyes sit in that brow right there. But when I'm looking at it, the brow should be a little bit lower. So perhaps not even a deflated region. It's just we need to bring it down. I don't want to make him look angry or anything, but I do want to see. I might need to do a mask for this. When in doubt, use a mask. We'll invert the mask. And then we'll do maybe an elastic deform. Ooh. The mask was like too defined almost. Okay. We don't want to drag everything down. So we'll just kind of pull brow itself. The side angle here. So we should remove some of the skin on the brow, some of the volume. Because looking at this side picture, there's not too much of it there. We can then smooth that out. Remove some of the skin around the eyes, so he's looks very oh, what's the word? Looks very emaciated because, he's made of corpses. Now, if we look at this middle picture, the brow does extend out to here. And then it feeds into his cheekbone a little bit. So I'm just going to start defining that a little bit more, giving his brow a little more definition. Kind of see that as we're adding the brow, we can kind of see the bone structure of this character. It's kind of what we want. We want to see the bone structure, see how is the face formed, and kind of give us some evidence as to why we're seeing some things. Why is this shape the way it is? And now we'll start to add a little bit of smaller things like these wrinkles. You can kind of get a feel for where things are. Could even add some wrinkles by the lower eyelids to really show that he hasn't had his coffee yet. He needs to have some before he can talk to anybody. I know a few people like that. Now we'll start to kind of define the brow a little bit because it's not just a total straight line. If you look at this far left picture, there's a little bump in that brow. So I'm just going to try to make that happen by just gently defining. I'm doing a lot of Control Z because that's just what you got to do. So that brow does need to be a little more forward because there is some shadow that comes from it. So I will add a little bit of a mask here. This looks like you don't want the mask to be super stark difference between the dark and the light, because then you're gonna have that weird how it looked like a landslide when I pulled down the brow last time. You kind of want it to be a fuzzy color. Increase the brush size to just do a couple. Pull this middle one out. It's getting a little less love. Okay, clear that mask. Now it looks a little more like a brow and less like a little, I'm not sure what it looked like before. Something like slapped on the front. It didn't really blend in with the general necessity of the brow shape. Okay. So now we'll go back to defining the brow. Nothing crazy, just add a little bit of depth to it. Kind of like adding the lines on the forehead, give it a little more definition. We're not going to keep these lines as stark as they are. We're going to blend those out just so we don't make the rest of the model look kind of weird. Then we'll just blend this out. You don't have a perfect line between the forehead and the head. So I may squish the top of that just a little bit. There we go. It's a little too square. So I'm just going to go back in and just add a little bit to the eyelids here. Because we're missing a little bit of the eyelid here. And then we'll just define that a little bit. And what's nice is, these aren't perfect lids, but because, this creature is made up of different body parts, we have a little bit of artistic freedom with, what should we have to make accurate to this picture and what can we add uh, logical additions to, what can we make a little more monster-ish or what should we keep more canon. And for me, the eyelids are going to be what I'm going to make a little less canon specific. Thank you, journalist. Yeah, I think it's coming out pretty well. It's not perfect, but I think it's coming out pretty well for what we're doing and how long we're spending on it. Just gonna define this lid a little bit more and then blend out that harsh line. I think we're just going to elastic deform the back of the head just a little bit. And just fix that little bump down there from when I move the chin. Jaw kind of starting right there. Okay. So we're starting to get a little more Frankenstein's monster look to it. So perhaps now we'll start on maybe the ear. So the ear is a little tricky. There are some tricks I've seen people do. I'm going to try one right now. It's been a long time since I've done this, so my trick may be moot at this point. Just going to blend out what I had. So I've seen people do is that they kind of get a general shape of the ear, kind of something like that, like this, and then they something like this, like that, and they get a mask. Is this going to work? I have no clue. Maybe you can already see what I'm trying to do here. Then we'll do invert the mask, bring up that size, and then they use either the grab tool or the snake hook, and they grab the ear that they kind of just made. And so this ear, it's a little bit, we need to pull this. This part needs to come out a little bit, this little cartilage piece. And then we'll pull this out. Let's try again. I like the makings of the ear. Maybe I'm just gonna try just sculpting the ear. Let's kind of add some shape to my bare bones already. Things like the earlobe, I'm not too worried like how the ear itself is looking, as long as it's an ear, as long as you can tell it's an ear. I'm not trying to match the earlobe perfectly with how the character is. A little bit of extra space, a little bit of extra flesh in that ear. And then we'll kind of grab this, expand it outward a little bit. Bring in that cartilage. Bring this out. To add a little bit of that extra real estate in the ear. Since my model is facing this way, I'm going to focus, trying to copy that rightmost picture, at least just how the inner flesh of the ear looks. It didn't work out. I wanted it to. So add some clay strips maybe instead. Hmm, okay. Well, I'm not gonna worry about that inner part of the ear then. So now we'll just carve out the ear. Let's hope this works. Like I may need to just pull the ear out. In my defense, I haven't done a human ear before. I've always done like hokey vampire ears and not a human ear. So please be patient. If you're watching this after the live, please be patient. It's gonna add some more depth to this. Yeah, ears are for me. It's the hardest part. I'll do eyes, I'll do nose, but ears, I dread doing the ears. I'm like, oh great. Just trying to add a little bit more depth to these ears, a little more mass. I also don't want to remove part of his head because that's not how ears work. It's kind of experimenting here with what works. Like I said, this is going through this real time. I've never done this character before. Okay, so now what if we mask the ear now? What would happen? Let's find out. Using the snake hook tool. Okay. Let's smooth the ear a little bit. How about that? Let's make it flush with the body. And what if we just pull it? Whoa. Okay, no. But if we grab it, so we know that this part of the ear comes out. Whereas this one goes in. Whoa, not that in. This one comes in because the earlobe sits. Okay. Let's kind of push this out there. Suppose I could have just used another mesh, like made a circle and then flattened it on the head and joined it. Just didn't think of that. But that's okay. This is just practice. Doesn't need to be perfect. So for now, I think that's good enough. It's not perfect, but we'll come back to it later, or I might do that later, off camera. So we've got this general head that's becoming more and less general. It's becoming more like our model here. So now we will, let's see. I think right now I will start to add some of the other details like the hair. So the hair, I'm not going to go anything too crazy. I'm not going to add a lot of like strands of hair or anything. But I will, let me save this too. I will start to add the area where the hair is. So I'm just going to trace out his hairline. Comes up here. Line him up right here. Go to the barber shop. Frankenstein's monster. You need to get lined up. So we'll do that. Then we'll add some clay strips probably to add a little bit of depth to it, a little bit of volume. Oops. So let's trace out where the hair is. Kind of add. Here, we're just going to flatten this out. So it's not going to be super crazy. If you wanted to, you could go in and start adding strands once you've got it generally laid out. You can use the draw tool and kind of add streaks. That's something I've tried to do with fur in the past. It's really not that easy. So I may not do that with this model, but at least the clay strips will add some texture and I can kind of play off that if I wanted to add some more texture to the hair. Okay. So generally that's the where I'm going to put the hair. So if you wanted to add texture, you would go in, whoa, too close. You would add things like add texture to the hair, something. It's usually like a lot of S's, just to give the hair texture. Something like that. You could also, there's like hatching. You can add the hair based on hatching. Depends on the shape of the hair and things like that. I'm not too worried about that at this moment because I'm not going to print this out or anything. If I did, I would try to make it um, a little more presentable, I guess, in terms of the hair. But his hair is also not that long. So there's really almost no point to add texture. So you could just keep it flat because his hair really isn't that long. But you could keep some of the texture like on the lower parts of the hair or on the upper parts of the hair, depending on how you want it to look. When I've done fur in the past, I've done the texture, then I kind of just lightly smooth over it. So we still have some of the texture, but none of that super depth. So you don't see a lot of like these creases. You just see the general depressions of the hair. So I might do something like that. So now we have to have some of the important parts. To add those staples on him, which to do that, I will first hide that hairline because the hairline's not that defined. That was more just for me to get a feel for where things are. So now for things like this, I will turn off the mirroring because I don't need it. There's no staples on both sides of his temple. There are staples on both sides of his head, so I'll mirror that. And to do that, I am just going to go from his hairline down and add that. And I'm going to just negative that around it and smooth it. Reduce the brush size and just really define what these are. Some staples. And then smooth that out so we don't see that definition. Then we could, if we want to just add it back into it right there. Now we can easily add more depth to those staples, which I think I will just a little bit. And then same thing, just make them more square with the negative draw tool, or draw with the negative on. And then just smooth that out. I'm sure there's different renditions of what this looks like. So you could add more staples, fewer staples, whatever you want to do. Because looking at the Far left picture, he only has one staple. So it really just depends on what version you're looking at. I'm trying to use all of these as similar references. I'm trying to mix them all together. But of course, if you have a staple, you need to have something to staple. So I'm going to add the suture that he has there. I'm going to turn off the mirroring, reduce the brush size, and go like this. I'm just going to follow his temple as it goes down his hairline. And it stops about here. Okay. And then we'll add some more staples because he's got some more. One right here. First, let's smooth this area because we're not going to need the scar there nor here. I know it's not a perfect one-to-one of where these are at, but I think for our purposes, it's fine. These are much smaller staples than the ones up top, so take that into account. Why do I have the symmetry on? So take that into account when you're adding those smaller staples. And then we'll go in and just define them a little bit more. And we'll smooth, define the staple. Okay. Now looking at this one, I like this scar on the face, so I'm going to add this scar on the far left. So it starts from about his hairline, comes down, and then we've got this thing here that kind of starts, it doesn't really hit his brow, it stops at his brow. We can kind of go like this, and that, and then the other. It's actually more like this. I'll make it a little bit more. Oh, let's do it. Make the makings of the scar. Here. Then we'll use the grab tool and we will zoom in a little bit. Ooh. And then we'll start to pull scar. Maybe too deep. So we know it comes from here. We get that little shape. And then we'll look at the grab tool. Add a little bit of flesh to the side. So it looks like the skin starting to heal around it. Or at least that there's skin there. Blend that out. Okay. Got the makings of a good scar there. So we'll just kind of hollow out some of the inside. Okay. So we see that his cheekbones are a little defined in these pictures. So I'm going to just define the cheekbones a little more emaciated. And you can see as I did that, there's our eye socket bone right there. So you can really see where this where the anatomy comes from and why we do what we do when we're making these. The cheeks are also just a little bit emaciated, so I'll just kind of add to the cheeks just a little bit, not a whole lot, because I don't want to make it look unrealistic compared to what we have. Okay. So I think I will add a neck and then maybe a bust. So I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to add a cylinder because that's like a neck. And then we will, oops, start moving it. The neck isn't a tiny little thing. It's actually almost the width of our skull. So we want to scale it. So it's about the width of the skull. Whoa, what was that? I broke something with that. I'm going to add in a new mesh. Cylinder, scale it. We can check by dragging it down, seeing how wide is this. I want it to be in here. It's probably a good width, I think. So we will bring it down. So it's on the base of the skull. And make it a little bit smaller, actually. Something like that. Oh, not like that. A little bit forward. Take a look at it. Okay. So right now I'm gonna, let's see. I'm going to, let's see, save this as a different file, just in case I don't like how the neck turns out. I don't want to lose it. Okay. I'm going to, let's see, make another copy. So I like how the Frankenstein looks right now. This is one that we'll actually make changes on, so I can actually move the neck and things like that. And then the rest, if I don't like it, I can revert back to the other copy and then just remove the neck and keep the face. So now I'm going to do this. I'm going to join these together. So now we have one mesh. And I will need to remesh this. So we'll smooth out this and we'll blend it together. So it's more like a neck and less like a cylinder sitting there. And the neck isn't totally a cylinder, so we're going to see, can we elastic deform that part of it? Yes, we can. Let's make a mask of that. So we want to pull the chin. So we're gonna elastic deform that. Let's see. How can we? Now we'll add a sphere to become the body. We'll scale that up. Okay. More or less, that should be okay. So we'll join these. Go back to sculpt. We'll remesh this again. Whoa, why'd you do that? Oh, because it was too big. 0.01. Okay. So now let's focus on this. This will be the chest and body, at least just the upper part of the body. Okay. So now we will elastic deform just to be a general, that bust-ish shape. So we'll pull, whoa, don't do that. Okay, so we will mask the ball, because I don't want to affect the face at all, or hard work. Snake hook, okay. So we'll snake hook this down. Want to give him a hunchback. So the bust, I'm really just going to make it like just the chest area. Oh, well, would you look at that? Okay. We didn't grab the whole sphere. Invert the mask. And let's keep on snake hooking this. So the snake hook, like I said, it kind of, you can kind of pull like that and make little weird shapes with it. The macaroni monster coming for your spaghetti. Okay, so we will make this into the general shape that we've seen busts as before, where it's kind of just the shoulder or the bust. We also didn't get that either. The mask like isn't getting everything that I want it to get. It's like he's gonna get a haircut. It's like he's wearing one of those haircut aprons. Okay. Me snake hook, please. There we go. Okay. So for now, I think that's okay for the body. We'll just kind of define a general area what the neck would be, like the shirt that he's wearing. Something like this. Thank you, journalist. Yeah, I think this guy's coming out pretty well for our first attempt. Said not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with how it's been out so far. So we'll kind of blend this together. It's supposed to be part of his neck. So the difference in color just comes from the light that's Blender has. If you look right there, that's the light. So where the light's pointing is where things look darker. So that's why like the back of his neck looks darker. I'm not sure if you're concerned about that or if you saw it, but that's why it's happening. Okay. Now, the quintessential part of any Frankenstein is the bolts in the neck. We require that. So I'm going to use our handy dandy mask. So those bolts go kind of right below the ear. So I'll put it like right here. Oh, invert the mask, and then we will use the grab tool, and we will. Ooh, if you press Control, it's a straight line out. There's no. Oh, there should be. Okay, let's try like this. Let's go mask under the ear. Invert the mask. We'll try snake hooking it. Interesting how it's not like an exact copy over there. Well, let's do another cylinder. We'll add a cylinder and we will rotate it on its axis. Then we'll go, then we'll scale it down. Scale. That should be kind of long and thin. Still like a cylinder. And we'll rotate it. Okay. Start moving it into position. Stick it in behind the ear. And then we'll scale it. We'll drag it out. Whoa. Why'd you do that? Okay. So we'll see, this is not really. Okay, to do two small ones, I think. I can't do a big one. Okay. So we'll scale it so it's a little more round. And we'll bring it into. Excuse me. Excuse me. My allergies are acting up this week. Now that fall's here, my body's saying, why, why don't I just make you sneeze? That'll be great. Okay, so let's see how that looks. To rotate just a little bit this way. It's coming out of his neck at a good angle. So make it a little bit smaller. It's really not that large. See, they're about. It would fit in his ear. That's how I'm looking at this bottom right picture. So I think that's a good size we have right here. So then I'll do Shift D for duplicate. And then I will copy it to fit on this side. As you can see, we have a little work to do. Cool. So now we can go in and just adjust this a little bit. Do anything too crazy? We'll remesh that to be a little better. Be a little less full of lines. Okay. Then we'll cut into it to give it a little bit of a bolt shape. Too big. A little bit of a bolt shape here. Kind of reminds me of little weights that you get with some kind of scientific scale. They have a little wide top like that, and they kind of have a collar. If you've ever taken a science class, I think you know what I'm referring to. The kilogram, pretty much. If you need to calibrate one of your scales, it looks like this shape. Okay. Now we'll do the same thing here. Smooth it out. Too smooth. Okay. So there we have our Frankenstein bust. The bust of Frankenstein's monster. So this is kind of our own rendition. I use those 3 bottom pictures as a reference. I tried my best to kind of merge those into what I thought would be the best reference image. So it's not perfect, but it's mine. I made it. I'm very happy with how it turned out. The ears would be something I would want to work on next time. I'll have to practice making ears, watch some videos on how people make ears in Blender. But in general, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I hope that you all like how it turned out too. So if you ever buy 3D printed stuff from people, know that they go through a process like this if they're sculpting it themselves. So this could also give you a little bit of a bigger picture of why some things cost a lot to make. It's not necessarily the printing, it's actually the labor going into making the model. But either way, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope to keep doing things like this in the future so that you can see, some of the things that I do, and I can share some knowledge of how we make 3D models. I'd also like to do more videos of back to my roots, like how I do action figure reviews or model kit reviews or model kit, like what do you want to call it? A showing of certain ones, what's good, what's not, where I got them from, the process of how I made those. So I hope to go back to those too. A lot of people first came to my page because I did that, and I started to dabble into miniatures and 3D modeling. So I'm a jack of all trades in that sense, but I'd like to go back into my roots some more. So if that's something you would like, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you had a good time. Let me know something else you'd like me to try next time I go live. If you want to see another bust or another sculpt. So I hope you had a great time, and thanks for being on this video, and I will see you in the next one.